the Varsity Club podcast. My name is Derek Peterson. Joining me this week, good buddy from back in Oklahoma. We work together at the OU Daily. He is now covering the ACC, a website called Saturday Road. Spenser Davis, hello, how are you? I think this is your first appearance on the podcast, so welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here.
How are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's I live in Kansas City, and it's been rainy for most of the day, but the sun just popped out. So getting a little vitamin D and just kind of enjoying this Thursday afternoon before the draft.
That is a positive omen for this podcast episode. That It's been gloomy all day, and the sun comes out as we start recording. So fittingly, we're going to talk about something stupid. We're going to talk about something that is not fun. Mark Emmett stepped down this week as the president of the NCAA. Well, not officially. The NCAA announced that he's going to be stepping down by June 2023 at the latest. If they find his replacement before then he will be out before then. But June 2023 at the latest, the president of an organization that a Supreme Court justice said is operating flatly illegally is out. So, Spenser, I have you today. We're just going to talk about like what's going on with the NCAA.
Yeah.
This conversation can naturally flow to NIL stuff, to transfer portal stuff, to college football breaking away and doing its own thing. To like, there's a bunch of different directions that we can go with this. It didn't seem like many people were too terribly surprised whenever news came out that Emmert was stepping down, but it also came a year ago, to the week, a year after he got a contract extension.
Interesting.
And that contract extension, according to reports, was going to pay him close to $3 million a year to be the president of the NCAA. So when this gets announced and you're sort of reading through the statements that are given by the NCAA, and they called it a mutual agreement between both sides to step away, the NCAA Board of Governors and then Mark Emmett to step away. Now, when there's a breakup, it's if people say it's mutual, it is not mutual. And in this particular situation, there's no part of me that believes that this was mutual. Mark Emmett had the best job in the country.
Oh, can I disagree with that?
Go for it. And then let me qualify.
I think the salary aside, he was making 2.7, almost $3 million. That's a ton of money. But salary aside, I think this is the worst job in all of sports.
No, okay. So let me qualify what I said.
Okay.
I agree with you that I think as they try to fill this position, it's going to be a nightmare for them because I don't think anybody is going to want it. And we can get into that. I don't think anybody wants it. Everybody is like, well, let Greg Sankey do it. It's a step down. It's a big step down to go from SEC commissioner to NCAA president. Because in reality, the NCAA president position might not exist in 3 years. And the SEC commissioner position might soon become czar of college football. In that sense, it's a bad position. But Mark Emmett had a very cushy job. He had no power. He couldn't do anything. He didn't do anything. He showed up to events and got paid $3 million a year to be a punching bag. I would do that. If you wanted to pay me $3 million a year for people on Twitter to yell at me 365, I would do it. I would not be on social media, and I would count my $3 million, and I would buy all the Yu-Gi-Oh cards that I wanted, and I would have my home office set up the way that I wanted it, and I'd be happy. So I don't think that Mark Emmett is just going to be like, I don't want to do it anymore.
Look, Mark Emmett is almost 70 years old. So it's plausible to me that he was just done with the BS, right?
Sure.
With the state of the NCAA right now, like you said, there's lots of different outcomes where the NCAA doesn't really exist as it has, 3, 5, 10 years from now. And look, man, he put in his time. All right. He made plenty of money. He's about to drift into his 70s. And I don't know. He can live on a beach in San Diego or where, I don't know where he lives. Live on a beach for the rest of his life.
I guess the point I wanted to make was that he felt like a person in a position of power that was just milking out as much as he could.
Yeah.
As much money as he could, as much time as he could. And the NCAA's Board of Governors said, this is a person that we cannot continue to have in a leadership position for our organization, because moving forward, we are entering into an era of college athletics that I think is going to be defined by just complete instability.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the last few years has been. He's obviously left a huge problems behind here. And I think, if it is in fact that he was pushed out, which I think is reasonable, as you're saying, like, they probably just want somebody with some new ideas, like a fresh take on kind of what the situation is. Like, there are some things that that are happening in college football and college basketball right now, like the transfer portal and NIL, that I don't think you can really put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. Like, that stuff is, I mean, like, good luck to whoever tries to quote unquote fix that. Like, you're not fixing the fact that, like, players have power now. Like, that, that's the world that we live in. These coaches that have been complaining about it, the most recent one was Bill Self that I saw the other day. Like, why should we care what Bill Self thinks? Bill Self is another guy that makes $5-6 million a year, or he's about to, after winning another national title. Like, I'm happy to see these kids have more power in terms of, like, what the rest of their collegiate careers are going to look like. Now, there's lots of instability, like you said, and I do think there's some regulations, or maybe some different things you can tweak to kind of make this better for everybody. But I mean, college sports as we've known it it's not coming back, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, putting the genie back in the bottle is, like, one of the points that I was going to bring up in a little bit, like, especially with NIL and with transfer portal. I don't know how you walk back the doors that you've opened. I don't know how you close. And, like, I was listening to Jimbo Fisher talk on the Rich Eisen show recently, and he said exactly that. He was like, look, all of us coaches can complain about stuff because everybody sees the problem, but none of us know how to actually fix the problem. And I think that's the biggest issue with Emmert. And I'm going to borrow a phrase that Jimbo used in that interview, where he said, he was talking about NIL, and he said, it seems like everybody, the route that you would normally go with change, with something new for you, is ready, aim, fire. And he said, with NIL, we said ready, fire, aim, which is, I mean, it's really accurate to describe what happened, but that is, like, I think that's going to be the biggest lasting problem with Emmert, is there was no foresight.
Yeah.
There was no, like, everything was so reactive, and it was slowly reactive on the NCAA's part over the last decade, as opposed to, I think, like, what they're going to look for now. And I think that there's going to be two pathways that the NCAA can take from this point forward. Cause I think this is an inflection point. They're going to go with fresh idea person that's going to modernize NCAA operating practices, that's going to bring it into the 21st century, so to speak, that's going to have them be more forward thinking, more preemptive in policy, things like that. And they will continue to be an entity. The other path, and I guess, like, if you have a podcast and you want to talk about something like this, like, you have to have a take. Like, this is my take, I guess, for this podcast. The other path that I think is more likely is no one knows how to fix the problems that have been created. And you can't, like, players aren't going to want to give back the control and the power that they now have, that they just got. And I think what's going to end up happening is they're going to have a really hard time finding somebody that fits everything that they want for this position, and that actually wants the position, because I could really see a situation where they're just like, we're just going to throw as much money at this person, and they're going to take it because it's a ton of money. And that's like bad faith starting point. Like, that's not where you want to be starting from. And in 5 years, the NCAA is not going to be a thing. And we're going to have college football operating under its own governing body, its own set of rules. Maybe there's a board of governors, maybe there's a commissioner or something. Like every AD wants a commissioner. Every coach wants a commissioner. They want, like, a central figurehead. Yeah. And that's not the NCAA president. And when that's the case, I don't know how this organization is going to continue to function.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of structural things that they just need to figure out, right? Like, I mean, yeah, if you have a commissioner, do you have to have a union? Because that's certainly, a players union, because that's certainly something that the NCAA has, rallied against. But, like the NIL stuff, like with kind of where it's going right now, I kind of question the overall impact that stuff is going to have. Because, like, if you look at the teams that have, like, perceived to have benefited the most, like let's say Texas A&M, right? Because they just had the number one recruiting class in the country come in February. Like, that's a rich fan base anyway. Like those, like in rich, whoever has the most money has dominated college football for as long as college football has been a thing, 60, 70 years or not. You know what I mean? Like college football has been around longer than that.
As we know it.
Right. Since, even going back a couple eras, like whoever has the most money wins. And to me, like, that has not changed. Like, Miami paying Nigel Pack, who's a basketball transfer from Kansas State, $800,000 and giving him a car. Like that, we know about that deal now. Like, I mean, it's above board now. And not that Miami's been a program that has historically, had like a ton of booster support necessarily. They've had some, but it's been inconsistent. But I mean, but at the same time, like now the boosters are backing the program, and we're about to see which programs have those boosters or community support. And those are the teams that are going to win. And frankly, those are the teams that have always won in college athletics.
Can I give you an opinion of mine and ask you if that is grounded in any kind of reality whatsoever?
Sure.
Okay. So Travis Hunter decommits from Florida State, commits to Jackson State. Everybody freaks out.
Yeah.
Oh my God, number one player in the country just committed to not Power 5 school.
Yeah.
What do we do? And immediately the reasoning that people latched onto was obviously he got a massive NIL deal. My question for you, I wonder if, like, because we didn't have NIL collectives. Like, I wasn't hearing about this.
Right. This is
a year ago.
Yeah.
This is a relatively new thing.
Yeah.
And I was listening to Nick Saban talk about his NIL situation. Bryce Young got a bunch of money a year ago before there was any like collectives or anything like that were supposedly paying for players.
Right.
He got NIL deals for what NIL deals were originally intended to be for. And then the Travis Hunter thing happens and everybody says, oh, well, he obviously went to Jackson State because he got an NIL deal, some huge deal. So now we see all these collectives popping up, and I don't know if they're related, but my question to you is, as somebody that pays closer attention to the ACC, is Florida State, like, have they jumped in on the NIL situation? Like, is there a collective that has sprung up down there? Do they believe that Travis Hunter that scorned them or whatever because of NIL money?
I haven't seen that take out there. I mean, look, it's been a few months since that happened. If Florida State does not have an NIL collective, I certainly expect that they will soon. I mean, that fan base is as passionate as any in the country, and they've got a large alumni base. Like, even like Oklahoma the other day announced that they have that they're starting an NIL collective where every player is going to be paid essentially a stipend of like $40,000 to $50,000 that they earn through, community work and things and stuff like that. Like every team is going to have that
salary, Spenser. It's a salary.
Let's go stipend. Look, I mean, it doesn't matter what you want to call it. Like, okay. Right. Like salary, stipend, like they're getting paid and good for them. Like players have deserved to have gotten paid this for a long time. Like these coaches have had $1 million salaries for a long time, and the players have been compensated with a scholarship, which has some sort of value, I guess. But yeah, like Florida State is certainly in that tier of program that I think is going to be competitive in this. And I don't know that it's fair to say that Travis Hunter left solely because of an NIL deal at Jackson State. Like, I think Deion Sanders' presence there certainly has quite a bit of pull.
I mean, I always wondered about that notion, because how much money does Jackson State have? How many like wealthy boosters does Jackson State have? Like, not
Deion Sanders. I don't know.
Not enough to outbid Florida State, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, if that was the situation,
exactly.
you were bidding for players,
Right. And I that's what I'm saying. Like, they could not have outbid Florida State. I think that, and Jackson State got a few guys in this class. I think 3 or 4 blue chippers that they stole from FBS programs. And I'm sure that as long as they win next year, and like as long as those players perform well, and maybe a few years from now, Travis Hunter will be drafted in the first round. And, if Deion is still at Jackson State by then, he hasn't gotten a better job, then I bet that, you'll still see a few guys a year end up taking that path. But like, yeah, from an NIL perspective, like once these big schools really get their ducks in a row, you're not going to be able to I wouldn't think that they'd be able to compete with that.
And I think the pie in the sky thought with NIL was that, particularly with Nebraska, because Nebraska thought that it was going to be a real recruiting tool for them as they embraced it, as the legislative body in the state was among the first to sort of draft legislation for NIL. Nebraska was thinking that it was going to be a tool for them to use in recruiting. And instead, what it has become is the same schools that had all of the best tools before now have that tool.
Exactly.
And it's not really a tool anymore. It's just like a thing. It's a thing that you have to have, because
this is like when Oregon started getting all these kids because their facilities were better than everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And then you know what happened? Like everybody else started building awesome state-of-the-art facilities.
Clemson put a slide in their facility.
Yeah, like Tennessee
LSU has sleep pods in their locker room. Like it turned into this insane thing. We're just going to do everything.
While we were at Oklahoma, they rebuilt their entire practice facility to the point where for 2 seasons they were, basically, their locker rooms were in like mobile trailers. Like they spent 2 years there so that they could build this state-of-the-art facility. And
their practice field was like 1 billion miles away from campus. That was incredible.
Yeah, they played literally on the rugby fields, like behind Lloyd Noble Center, which is, by the way, where they still practice under Lincoln Riley towards the end. Now that Venables is there, now they actually use their fields. But that's another story. We don't need to get into that on this podcast.
Well, you mentioned Lincoln Riley, because that's another place that I want to go, because the transfer portal and the NIL problem, if you want to call it a problem, they're interrelated. I don't think you can have both. I think you can have one or you can have the other. Well, I don't think you can have both.
Here's the thing that the only thing that I think you can fix. I talked about the the genie in the bottle, and I don't know how to do it. I don't have any ideas for how to do it. But like the tampering that goes on, that all these coaches have acknowledged is happening, like that is the thing I think that you can identify or try to report, investigate, and try to just really crack down on that. Like that stuff is the only option that I see for kind of tempering that like melting pot of chaos that you see in college football right now. Yeah. Like, because if Nigel, like let's use Tyrese Hunter, for example. And I'm not saying anybody tampered with Tyrese Hunter specifically, but he transfers from Iowa State after a standout freshman season where he goes from like a borderline, or not, borderline's not fair, but he was a 4-star prospect. Like, and now he's a long-term NBA prospect. Like he's probably going to get drafted at some point. And he transfers from Iowa State after his freshman season. He releases a top 6, and it's all blue bloods. So, like, I guess maybe he just knew, like, okay, I had an awesome year. I can just transfer, and maybe nobody from those schools contacted him or contacted anybody in his family. But maybe they did. Like 5 years from now or 5 years ago, if this Tyrese Hunter situation plays out, he's probably playing his sophomore year at Iowa State. I would have to imagine. And there's plenty of examples of stuff like this. I mean, coaches have Dabo Swinney, Jimbo Fisher, just a couple off the top of my head that have acknowledged like the tampering that goes on in college sports. And I think that is the element that you have to kind of tamp down if you want to get a hold of this.
Well, here's one that's in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I read about this the other day. Mac Brown, who's the head coach of North Carolina, said in an interview that he had a player come to him in his office and say, I have this NIL package for this dollar amount offered to me from school X. Can you match that? And if you can, I'm coming here. That's the problem. And
that's the stuff you have to cut out because and it's not.
How do you cut that out is the problem. And I know you don't have the answer. Nobody has the answer.
Yeah, nobody has, but to me, that is technically fixable. Honestly, there's been tampering scandals in the NBA, and tampering happens in that, tampering happens in that, teams talk to free agents before, right? But Sam Presti is not, Rob Pelinka is probably a better example, is not courting Zach LaVine right now, right? To come to the Lakers while he's still under contract for the Bulls for 1 or 2 more years. And that stuff, the NBA and, that stuff's not happening in the NFL or in Major League Baseball either. They just need to figure out how to self-police some of that, the tampering stuff. I mean, because that's out of control.
Yeah. I heard that I was watching I don't remember who said it was on the 247 video. Someone said that Nick Saban does not go to players. Players come to Alabama and ask, do you have a spot for me? That's not something that you're going to be able to rule out. That's not something that you're going to be able to just get rid of. Players want to go play at the best school that's going to get them drafted. So as long as Nick Saban's at Alabama, players are going to want to play at Alabama. If they have a good year, they're going to be like, hey, I wonder if I could go play at Alabama. That's true. But now he says he didn't. Do you believe that Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma, said goodbye to Caleb Williams, and then did not talk to Caleb Williams again for a month and a half until he went into the transfer portal?
Absolutely.
He says he didn't. Do you believe him?
Absolutely not. Why would you believe that?
So here's the thing that I wonder if this is a way. Lincoln Riley has been very outspoken about the pitfalls and problems of the transfer portal. Lincoln Riley has also built what he says is going to be the most unique roster in the history of college football by using the transfer portal and using the transfer portal more than anybody else. He's got the number 1 transfer class, according to 247 Sports.
The anti-Dabo.
If you have issues with it, I wonder if the way to force fix those issues is to not use it the way you're using it. Focus on high school kids.
An idea just popped into my head. I mean, what if we limit, we as in college football, the NCAA limits the number of kids that you can take in a particular signing class. What if you limit the number of kids you can take in a transfer portal class to 5 or 7 or 10? I don't know what the number is, but why not limit that number? Because then the 1,200 college basketball players that are in the portal right now, and obviously that number, the 5-10 number would be smaller for basketball just because the rosters are so much smaller. But if they know, hey, there's only X number of potential Power 5 spots open, and there may not even be that many, then maybe you do think less about, or you do think more about potentially entering the portal if you're in kind of a fringe situation. Yeah,
I think part 2, and way that media can help it, because I have a problem with this too. I do this too. There's a and it's a smaller issue, but it's an issue with the way that we talk about the portal. So I'm not going to use Nebraska because I don't want it to I don't want people to let's say an offensive lineman from Northwestern who is a reserve offensive lineman at Northwestern who didn't play, redshirted his first year, barely got on the field his second year. Now he's in the portal. When that player enters the portal, the story that we write up is about the things that he didn't do, couldn't get on the field, didn't do this, didn't do that. In the headline, we use reserve offensive lineman. Let's say that player transfers to Iowa State. I guess Iowa State pops into my head because you just talked about him. It's a Power 5 to Power 5 transfer. So when we write the player X transfers to Iowa State, we use language like impact transfer, push for starting snaps, depth in the room. That's part of the problem. Is we have in a sense glorified sort of being that missing piece. And I think that a bunch of people now sort of, instead of operating under the assumption that you are picking a college for 4 years of development, you are picking a college to be the missing piece, to be like that guy that wins a title. And when you don't play, you think that you can be the missing piece at another place. You can be a guy that wins it for them at another place.
Or you're transferring for a specific role, right? Like, okay, here's a good example. OU just had a point guard named Emoji Gibson, who's been a really good scorer for them the last couple of years, enter the portal. And it was pretty surprising. He had basically already announced that he was coming back. He said he was going to enter the draft, but said he was doing so with the intent of returning. But he ends up leaving. There's some speculation that OU may have another point guard commit. And Gibson his style is more of a shooting guard, but he's like 5'11". Like if he has any chance of playing professional basketball anywhere, it's going to be as a point guard. And so he kind of realized like, oh, I'm not going to be able to play point guard at Oklahoma. I need to find somewhere where I can so that I can try to show off those skills, right? Like that's just an example. And I'm sure there's examples on the football side of things too. But yeah, so it's either like I'm either the missing piece for, like Jared Verse transferring to Florida State, big linebacker, going to be a great pass rusher for them this year. Transfer from Albany. Now he's going to replace Jermaine Johnson on their edge, who was going to be a top 10 pick in the draft tonight, top 15. Like that is more the prototype of what you're talking about. We're like, okay, now I can go be the missing piece in this Florida State team, have a couple years to play, and then try to go to the NFL. But like you also feel like you're potentially making a difference, could win the ACC. And, Florida State's a team that's won the national title in the last decade. Like that's appealing to kids too.
Here's I have this in my notes. There's a quote from Nick Saban on the transfer portal. And like, I have used Nick Saban as an example a handful of times because Nick Saban is one of those guys that when he talks about stuff, it's a warning shot because he's like
it's a threat.
It was something that he was like, are you sure this is what you want college football to be? Oh, he was talking about offensive like renaissance in college football. And this was before Alabama decided that it was going to be a Death Star on offense. And he was like, are we sure that this is what we want college football to be? And everybody interpreted it as him saying he's scared of offensive advancements in the game. And no, it was Nick Saban saying, I'm going to be able to recruit whoever the hell I want to recruit. So if you want to turn the game towards this direction, we're going to continue to be unstoppable. So Nick Saban says this on the transfer portal. Everybody has an opportunity to go wherever they want to go, whenever they want to go. And if we think that's good for the development of young people, I guess it's okay. But I think everyone that's successful in life has resiliency and perseverance. Sometimes resiliency and perseverance. We've had a lot of guys. Mac Jones was in the program for 3 years and worked and developed so he could be successful. B-Rob, Brian Robinson, I'm assuming, was a fifth-year guy that didn't play much and had a great career, and now he has an opportunity to play at the next level. Somebody gave me a stat that our players have made $1.7 billion playing in the NFL since 2007, and all of those guys didn't play when they were freshmen. They didn't all play when they were sophomores. They didn't even all play when they were juniors, but they all developed, and I think that's what college is all about. You're supposed to focus on your development. And the interpretation of that quote was, oh my God, make the social media images, make the postcards, send them out. Nick Saban has another recruiting pitch. He has another sales pitch. I don't think that's what that was. It is a sales pitch. It is a recruiting pitch.
Yeah.
That was, hey.
Yeah.
It's not, the grass is not always greener on the other side. And the NCAA released numbers that almost half of the players that have gone into the transfer portal have not come out of the transfer portal. And I saw, to localize this to Nebraska, I saw a player who will not be named basically tweeting, hey, is any school looking for a player with my size and skill set at my position? And I thought, well, Nebraska, the school you left, Nebraska could use that. And if you had stayed, I don't know what happens.
Yeah.
You know,
Can I just say, like, on the Saban quote, like, some of that is ridiculous, right? I mean, like, Jermaine Johnson, who I mentioned a minute ago, transferred. Like, he was at Georgia for 2 years. Then he was ACC Defensive Player of the Year last year. Like, Joe Burrow didn't play at Ohio State. Guess what? He transferred, and it didn't ruin his career. Like, there are multiple paths. Like Baker Mayfield didn't, like Kyler Murray. Like, there's plenty of transfer success stories out there.
Yes.
And by the way, before Saban made those comments, he went and got a running back from Georgia Tech named Jahmyr Gibbs, who was, frankly, I know nobody's ever heard of this kid because he played at Georgia Tech.
He just
don't win any games.
Was like, I want this really good running back, so now I have this really good running back.
But he was legitimately one of the most dynamic skill guys in the entire ACC last year, and now he's on Alabama.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I mean,
Alabama was already doing this.
I have defended before. I don't think that we should be villainizing or demonizing players that go into the transfer portal. Because like in the same way that we kind of make them out to be like reserve and then, missing piece, impact, transfer, whatever, there is like when a player enters the portal, it's, oh, well, we didn't need them, we can get somebody else. And then when you get a player from the portal, this is the best day ever. They're the best person ever, even though when they entered, it was because they didn't have a like work ethic or whatever. But I mean, like there is a lot of truth to what Saban is saying. Like there's not, how many people, like isn't the number approaching 3,000 of college football of players that have entered the transfer portal? The number is absurd. I don't know the number off the top of my head. It's insane of the players that have gone into the transfer portal. There are not that many spots. It's not all about if you don't play your first year, like I can promise you the development that you're going to get from a Power 5 coaching staff and from a Power 5 program, from a resource standpoint, the resources that you're going to have available to you, it's going to be better for you long term than going to a school like Albany State and playing a year. And like in some instances, and as I say this, it kind of sounds like I'm demonizing transfer players. I'm not. In some instances, it's not what I mean to. Players just want to play. And you've like sat for 3 years and you don't see a path to playing time and you just want to play. And there are players that are in that situation and then they drop down to, G5, FCS, what have you, and they play and then they stay at that school and they play more and then they stay at that school and they play more and then they try to go to the pros. You can get to the pros from the FCS level. Yeah. But there are also players that don't play at Power 5 school X and then transfer to a lower level, G5, FCS, whatever. They drop down and then they have a good year and then they want to come back to the Power 5. Just stay and develop. Yeah. I mean, but like, in those instances, are they being, is it some Power 5 school being like, hey, we've got a spot for you? And like, of course they're going to say like, yeah, I would love to have like better facilities, playing at a bigger school, playing on national TV every week. Like, and yes, you can get to the pros from the FCS level and you certainly can from the G5 level, but your odds are better at a top school. Like when the NFL draft happens tonight, over half the first round picks are going to be from the SEC, I bet, or somewhere around there. Like, yeah. And the Big Ten is going to have another quarter of that. Right. And then, maybe there's 3 or 4 well, and the ACC is going to have 4 or 5, but like, the Big 12 will have 2 or 3, Pac-12 will have 3 or 4. And then like maybe there's an FCS or, a couple G5 guys mixed in. I don't know. But like on average, it's dominated by the same schools that it's dominated by every year that it's been dominated by for decades. And yeah, I mean, like the portal is just another beast. I will say, I think at some point, one, I think some of this will level off. Yeah. But 2, I think we're just going to get used to it. Like, I think coaches are just going to adapt. Like we're in like, I don't know, like, is this the second or third year of like this being just full chaos? I don't know. Yeah. It seems like coaches haven't adjusted yet. They're still kind of in the denial phase, I think, of this whole situation. But, it is what it is. Like everyone's going to have to adapt, and the coaches who adapt the best and the programs who adapt the best are going to win. Yeah, and I also think players are smart, and players are seeing what is happening to other players as they go into the transfer portal and then struggle to find a similar spot to come out of. And I've said since the beginning, I think that this is going to be like a situation that's going to explode and be sort of problematic. And then it's going to kind of, in some instances, it's going to kind of soothe itself along, and it's going to be a little bit smoother of a ride. But to sort of bring this back to Emmert and the NCAA and things like that, I just don't, as we see more and more like NIL influence on things, I am sort of questioning if that smoothing is actually going to happen. Because if that story that Mac Brown told is true, like if that's happening to
sure it is, yeah,
North Carolina, like that's happening everywhere. And if that's happening, like you're not going to fix the portal because
why do you think these coaches know that their players are being tampered with? I'm sure all of them are, dealing with some form of this.
As much as coaches want to, say that everything is above board, like it's a bottom line business and they get fired if they don't win, and they need to do certain things to win. And there are coaches that will do a bunch of stuff to win, and it's going to happen. And has been happening. This is the other part of it, is like all of this stuff has been happening. It's not like it's new. There's an FBI investigation into players getting paid for play. Which was
Quinn Ewers was not the first quarterback to be paid.
Mark Emmert's watch, by the way. I want to run through his resume because it's incredible. It has happened and is going to continue to happen. But I do wonder if we're going to reach a point where we can have one NIL, players being able to be compensated, or we can have loose transfer restrictions. Because if we got both,
no, it's both. It's both. It's got to be both.
You got to kind of figure out. You got to try to figure out a way. I don't. You got
to figure out a way to police tampering.
We're going to get an Super League then. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be European soccer's attempt at a Super League. It's going to happen. And it's going to be the SEC with 32 teams or 34 teams or whatever it is. And it's going to be the haves and the have-nots, and it's going to be even worse than it already has been.
That's what it's been forever. The first playoff that we got.
So my question to you,
there was a little bit of variety, right? Is it a problem? I think it's not ideal, but at the end of the day, I guess I do think that there will be some ebbs and flows to some of this, right? Alabama was terrible for most of our early childhoods, right? And if the next two coaches after Saban suck, then Alabama's going to suck, right? A lot of this is infrastructure and coaching on a specific level. Oklahoma was bad. Nebraska's been in a little bit of a rut here for a while now, right?
I appreciate you for calling it a rut. You are now one of the best guests on this podcast. You called it a rut. You came in from outside of Nebraska and you called it a rut. So everybody loves you now. Well done.
I know your audience. Tennessee has won the national title in 1998. They have not been anywhere close since Philip Fulmer retired. Sometimes these programs, can crash and fall. Clemson, after Dabo leaves, who knows what he does, moving forward. He's a guy who has threatened to quit coaching if players got paid. So we'll see if it seems like that. It seems like that is not going to hold true. But these programs do ebb and flow for a certain amount. The ones that are in the most, recruiting fertile ground are the ones that typically come up, the most often, right?
What's
USC, Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, LSU, Auburn. Those teams have been good for 80 years, and they're going to continue to be good with some certain ups and downs.
Yeah. Can I in my notes, I have a little bit of a resume from Mark Emmett. Can I read this to you?
Yeah. He was the university president, right?
He was university president before taking the job. And I have only gone back, I think, 6 years. In 2016, he signed an extension with CBS Turner Sports for March Madness broadcasting rights when there were 8 years left on the existing deal. And it reportedly lost the NCAA $3.5 billion because he signed it so early.
Look, they March Madness is, I think, the most valuable television property in any sport in the world. Like if you combine all the games and stuff, maybe the World Cup beats it out, but that's an every 4 years thing. So it's kind of hard to quantify. So I'm sure they still made a ton of money, but I think it was
8.8 was the number, which is
that'll play,
which is a ton of money. But I mean,
lost about a quarter of it
for an organization. There is a difference for a person, like 3.5 billion, like a difference between 11.3 million, or no, that'd be 12.3 million, 12.3 million and 8.8. The difference is 3.5. It's nothing. Like you already have 8 million. But
maybe if they had that $3 billion, they could figure out this infractions case on Nebraska a little bit quicker.
And you lost your audience. I thought you were going to go with like maybe they could actually like pay for some workout equipment at the women's tournament.
I wanted to localize it.
Okay. Well, I'm sure people appreciate that. 2018, Emmert defends the NCAA's position on sexual assaults following a report that he ignored sexual assault allegations in 2010 at Michigan State. 2020, COVID. That's all I have in my notes. COVID. Yeah. COVID mess. Every single coach in the country wants centralized rules. We don't have it. 2021.
That was Kevin Warren's fault, though, right?
I mean,
Kevin Warren in the Ivy League.
If you have a college football commissioner or figurehead, a figurehead that actually like knows what he's doing, like Kevin Warren doesn't get to just do whatever he wants to do because he has to play by the same rules that every other league is playing by. 2021, the Supreme Court rules unanimously that the NCAA cannot impose caps on education-related benefits. And a few weeks later, the NCAA clears the way for athletes to earn compensation based on their NIL. And during that ruling, Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh famously said that the NCAA's business model, quote, would be flatly illegal in almost any other industry in America. And Mark Emmett was the guy operating that industry. 2021, also 2021, and this was sparked by an Oregon women's basketball player sharing a viral video on TikTok. TikTok is the avenue, is the means of creating change. Called out the NCAA for its inequitable treatment of the men's and women's basketball tournaments. And that led to a 118-page report to review gender equity problems in NCAA basketball. And for the first time this year, the NCAA women's basketball tournament got to use March Madness branding.
Yeah, it's insane that they were not able to do that before then. And aren't they now? They're going to be at the same hosts in a few years now, right?
I believe so.
I believe they've made that change as well.
There is also literally an FBI investigation into the sport of men's college basketball.
Is that ongoing?
I mean,
I think the FBI part's over.
The FBI part is over, but the lasting image of Mark Emmett as the NCAA president, because look, I don't think that this, like I said, I don't think this is going to drag out to 2023. I think they're going to find a replacement relatively quickly because they need to.
Well, you put your name in the hat, so
I already did. Most of these organizations just have like support at, and then whatever the organization name is .org, and that's their email address. So I emailed my resume to support at ncaa.org, and I'm hoping to hear back soon. The lasting image of Mark Emmett as the president of the NCAA could very well be him handing the national championship trophy in college basketball to a coach and a program that are currently being investigated for multiple level 1 allegations and then calling that school by the wrong name.
I was wondering if you were going to remember that tidbit. I was going to tack that on too. Yeah,
I'm telling you, man.
The Kansas City Jayhawks.
If I got paid close to $3 million a year, I would never leave that job. He doesn't even know where the University of Kansas is located. Maybe he does.
Look, I mean,
tongue. But
Kansas, it's not the first time that Kansas City has confused, people in positions of power before.
Man, like what a way to go out. What a way to go out. This man's a legend.
Now,
finesse team. All finesse team.
Look, he's 70 years old. He's got, this is also the thing, like, When did he start being the NCAA president? Do you have that written down?
2010, 2011.
Okay. So this man just made
12 years.
This man made bank for a decade. And before that, it's not like he was doing poorly. He was a university president at, several top places. Like, nobody is ever going to hear this man's name again.
No.
Once they name his replacement. Like, he's going to be anonymous.
Well, he might. But it would only be in it would be in not very glowing conversations towards him. His name would be cursed. But we're not going to care what Mark Emmert says ever again.
Right. Who cares?
Yeah. I guess there are benefits to both ways. Like, you can continue to get paid to not do a job, or you can just fade into obscurity and sit on your millions of dollars that you collected.
I would do that job for half.
I'm sure a lot of people would. The problem is they're not going to be able to find anybody that's qualified to do it. Maybe we could get at the job. Maybe there's not going to be anybody.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, who's to say?
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, Joe Castiglione, Trev Albers, like that, ADs like that are at Power 5 schools are not going to be interested in this job.
Hey, man, if Trev Alberts was running, I would trust Trev Alberts to run just about any organization in the country, in any kind of business. I would trust him to run anything. Like Chick-fil-A, operating things, Trev Alberts. Trev Alberts is close, man. He's close. And that is saying something, because
I mentioned the rut that you guys have been in earlier. Like, having an AD that you have that much confidence in is legitimately the most important thing to getting out of that rut.
It is 100%.
Like, you have, like, he does need to actually hire a successful football coach after presumably Scott Frost is gone. Not to end his tenure so suddenly here.
Tom Osborne was here for a long time and won a national championship after a very long time. So right. Scott Frost is Tom Osborne 2.0. So we're not worried about that.
Okay, we'll roll with that. But let's just say Scott Frost, doesn't make it to 2023. Like, he does need to make a great hire, right? But at the same time, I'd sure as heck rather be Nebraska right now than Michigan State. When you consider the divisions and the Big Ten West is winnable, man. Like, you can go get the Big Ten West. You can beat Iowa and Wisconsin. Like, those are not Death Stars in the way that Ohio State and even Michigan and Penn State have been for the last decade or so.
The problem, if you're Nebraska, is you are going to constantly have to play all of those schools because the Big Ten Conference hates you from a scheduling standpoint. So
is it not just a fair 2-year cycle for?
It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be.
Well, geez, I wonder why Kevin Warren hates Nebraska so much. I couldn't put my finger on why.
Ohio State for 5 years, every year when it's destroying people. And now you get Michigan. When Michigan finally beats Ohio State, finally has a team that can beat Ohio State, now you got to start a 5-year window with Michigan. So have fun with that.
Well, pretty soon Harbaugh will be in the NFL, and then Michigan. Michigan's another team that was kind of lost for a little while. It ebbs and flows. You just have to time it right.
I read I think it was in The Athletic, a story about how Jim Harbaugh at Kansas was almost a thing. And
when? I
can't even imagine after Mangino left.
What?
I can't even imagine a world in which Jim Harbaugh is coaching at Kansas. At Kansas State, at Kansas City University.
Did Turner Gill replace Mangino? Do I have that right? Did they hire?
I think.
Did they hire?
They've been in purgatory since.
I mean, I guess it's kind of fair because Mangino, people forget they won an Orange Bowl.
They were in an Orange Bowl. It was insane.
Yeah. They had, Aqib Talib, Chris Harris Jr., Todd Reesing, they had some pretty good teams there.
Yeah, he built that team into a perennial high level bowl program.
But
which is why whenever anybody says that Nebraska can't be good, I just laugh.
Here's the thing. This is a great example of what I was just talking about with the divisions, because Kansas did that in the Big 12 North, which did not have frankly, Nebraska was in the Big 12 North at the time, right? But you didn't have Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Oklahoma State, right? It was Nebraska, Kansas State, and Missouri. And Nebraska's a tier above. Like Nebraska's a tier above the rest of those teams, but like that's still a winnable division, and in a much easier path to like the Big 12 title game. And Kansas took advantage of that.
Well, at the point Turner Gill took over at Kansas, Nebraska was no longer in the Big 12. So yeah, completely winnable.
Well, but yeah, I think the principle stands. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I agree with what you're saying. 100%.
And then so it was Turner Gill, and then Charlie Weiss, and then David Beatty, and then Les Miles. Whew. Hey, look, Nebraska's not Kansas. We don't have to worry about
another guy who, in one respect, had a cushy job. Les Miles. People just kept giving him money.
Well, now he's disgraced. So
now he's disgraced for legitimate reasons. But people just kept giving him money. Like if you're in college athletics, man, if you are in a certain demographic, people are just going to give you money.
One of those sayings is once you have one of those jobs, you always have one of those jobs.
Yeah.
Right. And Les Miles, if he didn't get into, all the stuff that he got into off the field, he'd be a head coach somewhere because he won a national title at LSU.
Yeah.
What do you think? Sorry to sidetrack here real quick, but this is hilarious. So David Beatty coached 48 games at Kansas. How many do you think he won?
5, 6.
6.
Yeah.
Yeah, 6. And if I'm not mistaken, one of them was.
I think 2 of them were against Texas.
Well, he won 2 conference games, and I bet the other 4 wins were against FCS opponents.
They were non-conference. I swear they beat Texas twice. I swear they beat Texas twice. But yes, I did look that up. Whenever it looked for a minute last season like Kansas was going to beat Texas again, I did look up like Kansas's conference record in recent history, and like it's like an absurd 40% of their wins are against Texas in conference play over a certain period of time.
He may be the worst. Like him and Chad Morris are probably the worst college football coaches in recent memory.
Can think of.
By the way, Kansas did beat Texas last year.
They did?
They did. They won 57-56 in Austin.
And we put Texas 6th. As a society, we allowed Texas to be placed 6th in FPI. There should have been riots in the street over that.
How did Sark not get fired? I feel like, it seems like the college football community has already forgiven Texas for that.
I didn't even remember that it happened.
Yeah, I was with you. I remember it being a close call.
Yeah, I thought.
Well, here's what it was. 2019, Texas won by 2. They won 50-48 in 2019.
So I think Texas should not be allowed to claim a rivalry with any other school in college football except for Kansas until they can consistently beat Kansas. I think that should be a new rule. If you want to unite the college football public and just general college sports public, here is a task, a day one task for the next president of the NCAA. Texas is not allowed to have an established or claimed rivalry with any other school in the country outside of Kansas until it can consistently beat Kansas on a football field. There you go. There is your day one. That's your platform that you campaign on.
This is a great example of like something that I think a college football commissioner should do is like have just like a set of arbitrary rules where like if you lose to Kansas, your school can fire you for cause, right? Like, or like, if you're USC and you lose in Corvallis back-to-back times, like they did, in their, I think it was in the Pete Carroll era. It was like they had a bugaboo with Oregon State and Corvallis. They kept losing there. Then like your
Mike Riley years.
I think it was still Pete Carroll because it was like a huge upset.
Oregon State.
Oh,
it might have been the Mike Riley years.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. But like if that happens to you, if you're USC and you lose in Corvallis, you have a bowl ban. Like like there just has to be some things that we just can't allow.
You get relegated.
You get relegated. Like you have to play, or you can't play an FCS opponent for 3 years because you can't. You need to prove that you can win on the road at Oregon State before you can do that.
Yeah. When I asked you earlier if a college football version of a super league would be bad, If it leads to a system of promotion and relegation, I will happily sign up. And that
I mean, pro rel has been my. I mean, we're both soccer guys. Like that would be amazing. Like and it would fix like, Kansas would have had to get its crap together a lot sooner, right? Like the Arizona schools would have to have their stuff in order, or they'd be in a bottom tier. Now that will never happen because of the reasons we're talking about. Like even like Oklahoma in the 90s would have been relegated, and they would have been, had a terrible theoretically you have a much worse TV deal, or like your revenue goes way down. Like that's what happens in the Premier League.
Yep.
And so, the schools are never going to sign up for that. But like, a Super League where there's like a top division of college football where there's like, I don't know, could you do like a top 40? Where like 40 schools are just competing for one trophy. Then there's like a middle division where they're competing for another trophy. And then maybe you have 4 divisions, but you don't have, but like, if you do that, you have to have pro rel, right?
Yeah. I wrote a piece on hailvarsity.com, and I guess this is how we will wrap it up because I can plug the website. I wrote a piece on hailvarsity.com 2 or 3 years ago now. That was how to fix the college football playoff, I believe. And it was basically like the crux of it was blowing up conferences, blowing up conference allegiances, and creating essentially a super league that had a system of promotion and relegation. And then I think I had 4 major conferences with, I want to say 16 teams in each. And then I borrowed Bill Conley's Pod's idea for scheduling. And then there were leagues like below that would directly feed into specific leagues at the top. And if you won it might have been 16, it might have been more than 16 teams, but if you won your like top 4 league, like you got an automatic spot in the playoffs. And then if you were like the top team from the like second tier league, you got an automatic spot in the playoffs. And then you took various other teams that were the highest ranked from the top tier, and you had a system of promotion and relegation. And and that was that.
That is the most fair way to do this, which is why it will never happen. Yeah,
I think it'd be great. I think it'd be super cool. If you want to read that, go to hailvarsity.com and I guess use the search function.
You're pumping up an article from 3 years ago. You're gonna have to put it in the show notes, I think.
But if you don't want to search for something that you're probably not going to agree with, then just go to hailvarsity.com and read everything that the team has there. Make sure that you are subscribed. You're a Hail Varsity subscriber. Use the discount code VARSITY in all caps. Go to hailvarsity.com/subscribe to get that. This show is a proud part of the Hurrdat Media Network. You can find other Hail Varsity shows on the Hurrdat Media Network at hailvarsity.com/network. So make sure to check up on those 2 things. You can also read Spenser at SaturdayRoad.com. Spenser, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. This was fun, man.
It was a blast. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, like I said, keep reading hailvarsity.com. Go follow Spenser if you want to. Go read his stuff. It's always excellent. Shouts to you guys for listening every week. Shouts to Cam for producing this episode every week. And we will be back next week.